call yourself an American? These are Americans. These are God-fearing people.
You've got certain moments in the history of American law enforcement where society says, wait a minute, we got to take a look at this in a different way.
Imagine forensic evidence deliberately falsified, leading to the execution of innocent people. Picture journalists and activists spied on, harassed, and silenced, all for exposing the truth.
I want the truth!
And then there's the case of a botched bioterror investigation, where the FBI ruined an innocent man's life, while the real threat remained at large.
I am not the Anthrax killer.
Today we're pulling back the curtain on the worst things the FBI has done. Part 1. Following the 9/11 attacks, the U.S. faced another terror threat. Letters filled with anthrax spores sent to media outlets and U.S. senators. The attacks killed 5 people and infected 17, prompting the FBI to launch one of the largest investigations in history. However, their initial focus was misguided, leading to costly mistakes and lingering doubts. The FBI's first suspect was Dr. Stephen Hatfill, a pathologist and biological weapons expert. Despite no concrete evidence, the FBI publicly hounded him, raiding his home and tapping his phone, ruining his career. It took nearly 5 years for the FBI to clear his name, awarding him $5.8 million in damages. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator, Dr. Bruce Ivins, a microbiologist at USAMRIID, remained under the radar. Ivins became a suspect after showing erratic behavior under FBI scrutiny. He had access to anthrax and was involved in analyzing samples. Before he could be charged, Ivins died by suicide in 2008. The FBI concluded that Ivins was the sole perpetrator based on genetic evidence linking anthrax spores to a vial in his lab. However, this conclusion has been contested by scientists and politicians who argue that the evidence was circumstantial and the investigation was flawed. Reports from the National Academy of Sciences and the Government Accountability Office highlighted weak scientific practices and analytical gaps. The case officially closed in 2010, but doubts persist. Critics argue that the FBI's methods were inadequate and Ivins's guilt was not proven beyond doubt. The investigation's handling has been criticized for its focus on a single suspect and reliance on circumstantial evidence, leaving uncertainty over the FBI's conclusions. Despite these criticisms, the FBI maintains confidence in its findings.
Standoff between a man who is wanted by the FBI and a large number of federal agents.
August 21, 1992, marked the beginning of a tragic confrontation that would become one of the most infamous law enforcement disasters in U.S. history. Randy Weaver, a former U.S. Army combat engineer, had moved his family to the remote mountains of Ruby Ridge, Idaho, seeking a simpler life away from what he perceived as government overreach. However, after missing a court date due to a miscommunication, federal agents arrived at his doorstep. The situation quickly escalated when U.S. Marshals encountered Randy's 14-year-old son, Sammy, and their friend Kevin Harris in the woods. A shootout ensued, resulting in the deaths of Sammy and Deputy U.S. Marshal William Deegan.
Honestly, I had no clue that there were people with guns in the woods that day.
The next day, the FBI arrived, implementing controversial rules of engagement that allowed deadly force against armed adult males. Sniper Lon Horiuchi fired a shot intended for Harris, but it tragically struck and killed Vicki Weaver, who was holding their infant daughter behind the cabin door. For 11 days, the nation watched in horror as the standoff unfolded. The FBI's actions were widely criticized, and when Randy Weaver finally surrendered, public outrage was overwhelming. The government justified its actions under the guise of national security, but the reality was a series of reckless decisions that left 3 innocent lives lost. The aftermath was profound.
Critics complain there was no real investigation and no real punishment after the 1992 incident. It's now clear their voices have been heard.
The FBI acknowledged wrongdoing, and the Weavers received a $3.1 million settlement. However, the damage was done. Ruby Ridge fueled anti-government sentiment and became a rallying cry for militias and extremists across America. This tragic event serves as a stark reminder of what happens when those sworn to uphold the law become the greatest threat. For decades, James Whitey Bulier ruled Boston's underworld with an iron fist, orchestrating drug deals, extorting businesses, and leaving a trail of bodies. What made him seemingly untouchable? The FBI. Bulier wasn't just a crime boss. He was also an FBI informant, a role he consistently denied. Agents, particularly Special Agent John Connolly, protected him in exchange for intelligence on the Italian mafia, allowing him to operate freely. While the FBI looked the other way, Bulier and his gang committed at least 19 murders. The corruption ran deep. Connolly, Bulger's handler, not only warned him of investigations, but actively helped him eliminate rivals. Their relationship was built on mutual trust and shared backgrounds, which helped Bulier maintain his cover. Other agents, like John Morris, were also implicated in the corruption, accepting bribes and further entangling the FBI and Bulger's criminal empire. When authorities finally cracked down in 1994, Bulier got a tip again from the FBI and vanished. He remained on the run for 16 years until his capture in 2011. Sentenced to life in prison, Bulger's story seemed to end there. However, in 2018, he was mysteriously transferred to a violent prison where he was brutally murdered within hours, an execution many believe was no accident. The Justice Department later found serious failures in handling his transfer. The FBI called him an informant, but the truth? They made a monster, then lost control. The legacy of Whitey Bulier serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of corruption and the blurred lines between law enforcement and organized crime. Imagine spending decades in prison, or worse, facing execution, because of junk science. That's exactly what happened to hundreds of Americans due to systemic forensic fraud within the FBI. For decades, the FBI's crime lab was seen as the gold standard, but in reality, it was riddled with flawed analysis and overstated evidence. In 2015, a shocking review revealed that FBI hair analysts provided erroneous testimony in a staggering 96% of cases examined. The impact, devastating. At least 33 death penalty cases were affected, with 9 defendants already executed. Innocent people were sentenced to die because of forensic errors. Even more chilling, these flawed techniques weren't confined to the FBI. They trained hundreds of state and local crime lab analysts in the same problematic methods. The scandal exposed how FBI experts systematically overstated the certainty of hair matches, claiming they could link crime scene evidence to specific individuals with near certainty. In reality, microscopic hair analysis isn't nearly that precise. Some examiners even assigned statistical probabilities to matches, a practice with no scientific basis. Justice came too late for many. Some, like Cleveland Wright, spent 28 years behind bars before exoneration. Others weren't as fortunate. Of the 33 capital cases with errors, 5 defendants died on death row and 9 were executed. The FBI calls itself the premier law enforcement agency. But when those sworn to uphold justice rely on flawed science instead, who pays the price? This scandal has shaken the foundations of forensic science in America, prompting urgent calls for reform and leaving us to question how many other innocent people might still be behind bars due to faulty forensics. The FBI is supposed to protect American freedoms, so why has it spent decades silencing journalists? From spying on reporters to raiding newsrooms, the agency has repeatedly trampled on press freedom in the name of national security. One of the most blatant abuses? The FBI's secret impersonation of Associated Press journalists to catch a suspect. In 2007, Agents created a fake AP news story laced with malware to track a bomb threat suspect, without the AP's knowledge. This reckless move undermined media credibility, making it easier for authoritarian regimes to justify spying on journalists worldwide. But that was just the beginning. In 2021, the FBI raided the home of Project Veritas founder James O'Keefe, seizing his notes and confidential sources, raising concerns about violations of press freedom protections. The raid was connected to an investigation into the alleged theft of a diary belonging to President Biden's daughter. The FBI's actions extend beyond individual cases. Documents revealed in 2015 showed the agency had secret rules for using national security letters to obtain journalists' records, circumventing the stricter media guidelines. This loophole allows for surveillance of reporters without judicial oversight. Moreover, the agency's history of targeting journalists spans decades. During the COINTELPRO era from 1956 to 1971, the FBI conducted nearly 1 million intelligence investigations on Americans, including journalists, often infringing on First Amendment rights. When the press is afraid to report the truth, democracy suffers. The FBI's actions, from impersonating reporters to conducting raids and surveillance, send a chilling message to investigative journalists. So, is the FBI protecting America, or protecting its own secrets? The ongoing struggle between national security and press freedom continues to shape the landscape of American journalism. Imagine showing up at the airport only to be told you can't board. No explanation, no warning. You're on the no-fly list and your life just changed forever. But what if you were put there not because you were a threat, but because the FBI wanted to control you? For years, the FBI has weaponized the no-fly list, using it to coerce innocent people, mostly Muslim Americans, into becoming informants. Individuals who refused found themselves grounded indefinitely, unable to visit family, travel for work, or even return home from overseas. Some only discovered they were on the list when stranded in foreign countries with no way back. The scale of this abuse is staggering. As of 2014, the no-fly list contained approximately 64,000 names. Even more alarming, leaked documents revealed that over 98% of those names were of Muslim origin, exposing a clear bias in the system. In 2014, multiple lawsuits exposed the FBI's abuse. The government's process for adding names to the list was opaque, with many people never told why they were banned from flying. The consequences were severe. Jobs lost, families separated, and lives upended. In response to legal challenges, the government created a limited process for individuals to challenge their placement on the list. However, critics argue this process remains inadequate and lacks true due process. The FBI claims it's about security. But when an agency can destroy lives with a secret, largely unchallengeable blacklist, who's really the threat? The no-fly list, meant to protect, has become a tool for coercion and control, raising serious questions about civil liberties and the balance between security and freedom in America. The FBI was built to enforce the law, but time and time again it has twisted the truth, ruined lives, and buried its darkest secrets. From wrongful convictions to covert surveillance, these cases prove that unchecked power is a dangerous thing. But what do you think? Are these just the tip of the iceberg? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because this is just part 1. And trust me, the FBI's worst mistakes are far from over.